Alrighty, well, good afternoon, everybody. We do have over 180 people who've registered for today's session, so please do bear with us as we try and ensure that everybody's joined us online. But hello, my name's Maria Demopoulos. I am the CEO of the Settlement Council of Australia. Let me start with an acknowledgement, of course, to country and recognise the various countries virtually that you may be coming in on. I'm here in the western suburbs of Melbourne. I'm on the lands of the Bunurong Boomerang people of the Kulin Nations. I'd like to pay my respects, particularly as a migrant to this country, to the lands, the waterways, and of course to the extraordinary wisdom that characterises the history of this country. Many of you around the virtual room might also know that, of course, SCOA launched its first ever reconciliation action plan together with Spectrum Migrant Resource Centre and the Reconciliation Australia. So we're very, very proud of the national conversations that we are beginning across the country. We are in for a very, very special webinar, and I'm not going to say too much because it is jam-packed. Today's seminar or webinar is actually part of a two-part approach. We are responding in essence to a particular request that came from a number of our members in relation to the pre-arrival process, UNHCR's role in global protection and solutions pathways, and what the relationship is between international displacement dynamics and settlement practice in Australia. So a two-part series. The series itself is going to bring a number of organisations together, particularly UNHCR, Refugee Council of Australia, SSI, ARPAN and sector partners to really strengthen our shared understanding and support informed advocacy around the global protection system and local settlement work. So this is part one. Part two, I'm going to talk a little bit about towards the end of today's session, but I do really want to launch into today. Let me just give you a brief overview of what you can expect. It's a 90-minute webinar. Essentially, we're going to start with a keynote address from Soo Jin Rhee, who, of course, many of you would know around the room is our UNHCR regional representative. She's going to give us a wonderful overview of what the current global displacement context looks like, why the settlement sector matters to the long-term program success, and any key advocacy messages. Of course, we're very well aware of what the current political environment looks like, so any insights, of course, that the Commissioner can provide us would be wonderful. We will have a presentation that goes for about 30 minutes and then a moderated Q&A. And then the next part of it really is an opportunity for the CRCP consultations and context. And Adama Kamara is the you are the shared CEO, the joint CEO of Refugee Council of Australia. She's going to give us a bit of an overview of what that process looks like, what some of the emerging themes are, and of course, get some feedback from you. So that's an opportunity for you to give your insights and thoughts. All of this matters. As I say, it's a real opportunity for the Settlement Council of Australia as well to be able to document some of your thoughts around those emerging themes. From time to time, folks, we do have the AI readers kind of feature. We do ask that unless you absolutely require them for access reasons, that this video will be recorded. It will be shared across our membership. So if you are needing to share any of this, it will be made available to you fairly quickly. Our turnaround tends to be very good. Okay, well, unless I've missed anything, I'm looking at the team right now. but I am going to launch into introducing our very special, very esteemed guest speaker. As I said, many of you around the virtual room will know that she needs no introduction, but I could, of course, introduce you over a period of 2 weeks and still not adequately capture the extraordinary background, wealth and experience, but I'm going to try and make this as succinct as possible. We will attach Soo Jin's bio to the end of this recording as well. But United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, our regional representative, she assumed that position in Australia on the 1st of July 2025, almost 12 months ago, bringing nearly 3 decades of experience with the organisation. Over her 29-year career, she's held a wide range of roles across both field operations and headquarters, contributing to UNHCR's mission in diverse and complex settings. Most recently, Ms. Rhee served in Geneva as the principal coordinator for the Deliver Better Roadmap, where she led strategic initiatives aimed at enhancing UNHCR's efficiency and effectiveness in delivering protection and solution for forcibly displaced and stateless populations. Oh, can I ask people to please turn their mics off so that there's no background noise? Look, as I say, I could go on and on and on. Prior to that, you were the Deputy Representative in Bangladesh. You played a pivotal role in UNHCR's response to the Rohingya refugee crisis. You have been an advisor, I think, to just about every part of the organisation. You began in 1996, my goodness. At one of these stages, I'm going to grab you for our spotlight, our 10-minute spotlight session to get some insights of 30 years of amazing experience. You hold a Master's of Arts in Political Science, a Bachelor of Arts in Mass Communication and Journalism. Is there anything you don't do, Soo Jin Rhee?
Thank you very much, Maria, for this very elaborate introduction. I'm very pleased by the introduction, and also, well, it's really good afternoon to every one of you. And also, I want to thank Maria and SCOA for organizing this event, to also meet other sector partners, which is very difficult to meet in person because Australia is so vast, and you also have a very vibrant civil society who are really doing an excellent job in the settlement service provider. So I just want to thank all of you. And maybe I take this opportunity to give the global context and what UNHCR is doing with the pre-arrival and how we do our protection mandate delivering globally and also in the field and every context here. So maybe I'll take that opportunity. And then I do understand that I'm giving like maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and then I do understand there will be a Q&A session. So we do have the back and forth session, so interaction. So I look forward to also the civil society's comment or anything you would like us to elaborate more in detail. As mentioned, I mean, as of end of 2024, we had about 117 million forcibly displaced population globally at the moment. By the way, on the 11th of June, we will have the latest the trend analysis paper that's going to come out, really giving us the concrete information on the figures of how many are forcibly displaced and how many do we have refugees around the world and stateless population, etc. But as of the latest data, as I mentioned, there are 117 million. Of those 117 million, 42.5 million are refugees. And I just wanted to say, and then there are about 70 plus internally displaced people, and we have the stateless population. UNHCR has 2 mandates in a way, because we have a mandate to provide protection and solutions to the refugee, but also to reduce and prevent statelessness. So these are the 2 main mandates that UNHCR are entrusted by the member state in the General Assembly. But then the unfortunate reality is over the past decade, 10 years, the displacement population has doubled. So this is really the unfortunate reality UNHCR faced with it, a rising conflict and the crisis globally. And this is where we're heading here. In Asia Pacific, the region where we are here, there are about 17.3 million forcibly displaced population here. And we have two major situations that in Asia Pacific here, which is the Afghan situation and the Myanmar situation, because Afghan situation touches many of those Afghan refugees in Iran, Pakistan, and also those at the moment returning in adverse condition to Afghanistan. So that is the first population, big group that we have in Asia. The second is the Myanmar situation, which covers the displacement in Myanmar, where there's about 3.7 million IDPs, internally displaced person in Myanmar, and then we have about 1.3 or 4 Rohingya refugees who are out of Myanmar, and majority of them are in Bangladesh, 1.1 million refugee, and we have about maybe less than 200, maybe 120 or 50,000 in Malaysia, and we have about 80, 90,000 in India, and then the surrounding area. But this is not only the Rohingya refugee we have here, but we also have other ethnic group who also had to flee Myanmar. So these are the big two situations that we have in Asia. Of course, we do have the other situation of the Sudan crisis, the Yemen crisis, all this DRC crisis, etc. So globally, we do have many people who are displaced in the last 10 years. But then we are also heavily impacted by the financial crisis of last year because the US, who is our #1 donor, have reduced their financial contribution, but other donors have also reduced their contribution because they're investing more on the defense budget. So this is the reality we're faced here. Now, UNHCR, sorry, time to time, I had to wave my arm because I have a sensor, so the light goes off every 15 minutes. So just bear with me if I'm doing all this hand gesture. Now, so then we are working in all of this region globally, and we're providing the protection and the solution. Maybe today's topic, I'll be looking into more of a solution part, because this is where it's touching many of the sectors in Australia, the settlement service here. Solution, when we look at the solution in UNHCR, we have 3 solutions, durable solution, as we say. The first one is voluntary repatriation. The second one is local integration. And third is the third country solution, which is resettlement and the complementary pathway. Now, voluntary repatriation is the most preferred solution, but then this has to be done in a voluntary, in a sustainable manner that also upholds the integrity of all this repatriation. But unfortunately, currently, we do have many of those repatriation going on, 1.7 million, in a very adverse condition, especially for Afghan refugee, and we have the Syria return, and also South Sudanese return. So that's about 1.7 million repatriation that is happening currently. Local integration is another possibility, but local integration is a very difficult one to achieve because not many of the host government are willing to locally integrate the refugee in their community, in their nation. But we do have those cases, 89,000, that is happening here at the moment. And in our case in Asia, we have the West Papua and in Papua New Guinea, which we're working with the Papua New Guinea government of the naturalization prospect. But we also have some positive light here in Thailand because we had the Karenni refugee along the Thai-Myanmar border who have been staying in Thailand for more than 3 decades. But recently, the Thai government has allowed them the right to work, meaning that this is allowing more the inclusion to the national system along this. So this is in a way how we can phrase the local integration, not really a local integration per se, but more of the inclusion element for people to be more self-reliant. Then that's the second doable solution. The third doable solution is the resettlement and the complementary pathway. When US was the #1 resettlement country, they provided really 120,000 per year, the annual quota, but they have pulled back on the resettlement. So now what we used to be resetting 188,000 in 2024, that place has reduced to less than 30,000 currently this year. And we have very small number of resettlement country part of this resettlement. Number one is Canada, and Australia comes as number 2 in providing the resettlement places. And number 3 is New Zealand, and New Zealand is only 1,500 places. It's very small. They haven't increased their quota. It's just that other countries have all reduced their quota, and that really bumped up. And New Zealand, who used to be number 5 last year, is now number 3 in the resettlement spot here. Now, resettlement is so limited that we cannot just look at resettlement. So we have also looked at the other pathway, which is called the complementary pathway. Complementary pathway is looking at education pathway, the labor mobility, and all this possibility in order to expand the solution here, because there's such a limited space available in the resettlement. As I mentioned, there are about 42.5 million refugees. It's only refugees who are eligible for resettlement. Of those 42.5 million refugees, we have about 2.2 to 2.5 million who are in need of resettlement based on their protection and vulnerability criteria. And this is where it's really, we have this huge demand, but then the places are not available. And this is going to be the reality that we're facing at the moment. And the resettlement needs to be catering to the fundamental principle of based on protection need, those who are highly vulnerable. It is not based on because of their profiles or not because they have their visibility or someone advocating for the case. Rather, it is those who are in most need that deserve to be resettled. But unfortunately, because there's such a high demand and limited the place, the reality is not everyone will be resettled. So this is the harsh reality we faced here. Now, looking at it, I just wanted to maybe also highlight, even though I said today I'm going to focus on solution, but then UNHCR as a protection agency, the solution really plays a critical place here, because it also plays a protection tool for UNHCR, because majority of the refugees are staying in the host country, in the neighboring country. So many of those will not be resettled. Millions of people, like 43 million, 42 million plus people will not be resettled. So meaning that what very vital for us while we're trying to create a conducive condition for voluntary repatriation, that we have to work with the host government to ensure that the protection of asylum space are available for many of these refugees who will remain. So resettlement serves as a tool for us to show to the host government that this is part of the burden sharing by the international community. Because as per the Global Compact on Refugee, it is about how the international community can come and do the burden responsibility sharing to the host government who are bearing the brunt of hosting this refugee. Because at the end of the day, many of these refugees are staying in the host country. So whatever gesture that is provided, it is really preserving the asylum space in those host countries. So UNHCR, it is very important that we are able to use this resettlement to the government who are hosting that please do not forcibly repatriate them or to refool them in the legalistic terminology, return to the country of origin where they're going to be facing persecution. So this is something that we just wanted to highlight here. And in this context in Asia Pacific, we have many of the Afghan refugees who are returning in adverse condition to Afghanistan at the moment from Iran and Pakistan. So when we discuss with the Pakistani government or the Iranian government, I know that Iran at the moment with all this current conflict and war going on is a bit challenging. But for us, when we discuss with Pakistan government, it is for us to make sure that those people who are in the pipeline of resettlement are not going to be forcibly returned. For us, it's more of those advocacy tool. And also saying that those vulnerable groups who cannot be returned, that we need to say that resettlement is one of the viable options for them to make sure that the space is available for those people not to be forcibly returned. So for us, it's an advocacy tool for UNHCR. So resettlement is not only a life-saving activity for the individual, but it is serving as a protection tool for us, for UNHCR. Iranian government before the war was very, very upset the resettlement places were reduced because they pay a lot of attention how many people are resettled. So meaning that all the government, they look at those elements here. And then having the resettlement is also our advocacy too, like for in case of Malaysia, I mentioned many of the Rohingya refugee and then the Chin refugee, they're in Malaysia. And at the moment, we're trying to work with the Malaysian government on inclusion element for refugee be to include it in the national system to access the right to work, education, and the healthcare system. So for us, we need that leverage to do the advocacy with the Malaysian government. And what is the positive development that is happening currently with Malaysia is now Malaysia is taking on board doing the registration of the refugee because any of the asylum system that you want to build is you need to know the population and registration is the first step of knowing who are the population in your territory. So that is a positive element. So they start initiating this registration process. And in Malaysia, the employer federation are very keen to have refugee accessing the labor market, but they're not going to risk anything until there is a regularized legal pathway for refugees to access the labor market that allows them to do it. But then we have to be continue working with the Malaysian government to allay their concerns of that this is creating a competition with their local population. So meaning that this is something that we have to be working with the Malaysian government and to advocate on the inclusion, and then resettlement serve as one of those tools to ensure that we can leverage on that one. In Indonesia, like Indonesia is the only country in Asia that allows a search and rescue operation and also to allow disembarkation of those people. And then they do pay attention how many people are being resettled. They look at the number of the resettlement submission and departure because without having those numbers signaling, then they're going to close the door. They're not going to be willing to do the rescue or the search and rescue, and although this is disembarkation. So meaning that even though resettlement may affect a few individuals, a few hundred, a few thousand, for us, UNHCR, it is very important for us to do our advocacy with the host government to ensure that refugees are not being forcibly returned, that they're able to be staying in the host country. So this is something I just wanted to maybe give you the context and why resettlement is very important for UNHCR. Well, in the pre-arrival stage here, how is resettlement determined? So UNHCR has all this in-depth knowledge because we have presence in the field and we have refugee. So we have a country of origin information and what are the vulnerability criteria and what they're facing. So we are looking at all the population, looking at the profile, who are the most vulnerable population who are in need of resettlement. So we already identify those cases and we sit with the resettlement country saying that these are the population that we need them to be resettled. Then ultimately it's the state, the resettlement state, who have to decide, okay, we have this set number of quota, and we want to prioritize which caseload. So they will indicate which are the caseload they're going to be start processing. So they will indicate to us, UNHCR, say, please, we need how many from this location or that location or which profile. This is how it works in the pre-arrival stage of the resettlement referral submission and the processing, etc. But then please note that this resettlement submission is a very rigorous process because we have to make sure the integrity and transparency of the resettlement is upheld in order to make sure that resettlement is going to be sustainable, that is going to be accepted. Because in Australia context, a lot of word is about social license, acceptance of integrity of the process. So this, I would just say, this is very like a dual process that's happening internally. UNHCR we do this biometric registration in order to ensure the identity and prevent fraud. We also do interview of the family composition, looking at their refugee story. So we do the resettlement, the refugee status determination. We also do the credibility check of the family composition. And then if there's a child or anyone, then we do child-based determination to see which is the profile. So we do many of those checking mechanism and protection assessment and all this state, which requires the expertise of protection resettlement staff to process this mechanism here. But even though we have done it, many of the resettlement states, they do their own process to validate that what we have submitted is accurate and is also into their interest. So they do the security assessment, they'll do the character assessment, they'll do the health screening. So I just wanted to rest assured to the sector that of all the immigration process that you will go through, the resettlement process is the most scrutinized, most valid, vetted system that you ever see. So I think we need to have a clarity and maybe have a better communication system to dispel the notion that those criminals or the terrorists is coming into the country, because there is a conflation here because they think, we're bringing all these terrorists and all these people who want to threaten our national security. But I think that better communication needs to be going out to the community to allay the concern, because this is sometimes there's a confusion here. And this is like a detriment for our resettlement process. But in the humanitarian program, I mean, at the moment it's 20,000, but we have to advocate among the civil society that this fundamental humanitarian program needs to be sustained and the number has to be maintained, because it's really vital importance for those refugees who are in peril and also many of the refugees who are in the host country to make sure that they have an asylum space there. Because I mean, if you have that avenue closed, there's going to be more desperation here. So meaning that how do we look after the welfare, the well-being of the refugee, and people in desperation is going to be going on move. It's about how do you stabilize the population, and also how do you create the regional stability as well. So it is in the interest of the Australian government that they need to sustain this humanitarian program, because it's very vital for us to maintain this one. So I just wanted to just highlight this one. But another thing I just want to highlight, in the humanitarian program, there are many composition of what comprises the humanitarian program. One of the advocacy point that UNHCR is saying that the onshore asylum process should be delinked from the offshore component, because you're trying to combine the onshore asylum and the offshore, and you're trying to put everything into one envelope. But this is a completely different caseload. So we need to also advocate to delink that. Offshore should be ring-fenced and safeguarded, and onshore should be a separate work stream. So that's one advocacy point that I just wanted to highlight here. On the offshore component, we need to also understand, why do we have an offshore component? What's the principle of the resettlement? It is based on the protection foundation. It is not based on, they have a skill set, or maybe there is for education pathway. I just wanted to say the other component of the humanitarian offshore, you have the UNHCR referral protection-based submission, you have the family unit, you have the complementary pathway, and all this like the CSB, the CRISP, and all the education and the labor. That complementary pathway cannot replace the core protection foundation of the resettlement, because without that, then you're like it dilutes. Why do we have a humanitarian program? Because it has to be based on the principle of protection vulnerability. But then the complementary pathway needs to be additional, because this is where you need to advocate collectively, say it has to be additional. But then the government comes with their argument with the cost of living, affordability, and budget austerity, that this is not going to be sustainable. So the fundamental issue is, how do we make sure the humanitarian program is going to be socially accepted, and then also uphold the integrity and transparency of the process, but ultimately the sustainability of the humanitarian program? Because this is something maybe I will throw a very provocative question to the sector, because sometimes like what we need to also bear in mind, how do we balance the number of the humanitarian program where there is an initiative to reduce, but then also another one, can we still maintain the golden standard of the service delivery? Because this is something we need to look at, because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we maximize the humanitarian program to benefit the maximum people that is in they are in need when the places are getting small. So I think what we need to work as a sector together is how do we balance the the humanitarian program number, the budget issue, and can we still maintain the gold standard of service delivery? And what are the other things can we look? What is the other mechanism or cost sharing mechanisms to sustain this program? Because it all boils down to sustainability element. Can we maintain this program in the longer run? So on that note, Maria, I give the floor back to you. And then if there are any questions, I'm all here. I'm on standby.
Well, that was wonderful. Thank you for that excellent overview. We have a few questions that have come through the chat. So John asks, you mentioned that resettlement is based on safety, not profile. In your view, is geopolitics playing a role in deciding who to resettle? Such a vital question, and it's one that I hear a lot in the consultations that I'm currently doing with our sector. So how significant is the role of geopolitics in this discussion right now through your lens?
Well, this is a very good question is being raised here. UNHCR has been always advocating with the resettlement government that resettlement submission be non-discriminatory. That it has to be based on the needs and not based on the discriminatory nature. So this is what we're always advocating with the resettlement state. But unfortunately, the resettlement state are the one ultimately choosing who they want to accept. So this is something we just have to bear in mind that we do have our principles, but then we also have to bear in mind the states, what are their priority that they are looking into resettling the people. So, we do our part to advocate all caseload regardless, but then when we have a bilateral discussion, it really boils down to the priority of the state government, the government.
No, thank you. Look, you mentioned the point about social license, and it's one that comes up again and again in the engagement that SCOA does with its members. The current political environment, one where we are seeing, sadly, a lot of demonising of refugees. How do we formulate a consistent message? You touched on it, of course, but how do we formulate one in an environment where reference to compassion or reference to inherent human rights just seems to fall short? Are there other kind of messaging that you think have been helpful that might be something that we can form as part of our advocacy platforms? Anything you can share there?
Maria, I think, at the moment we're in a very challenging period at the moment because there's such a high anti-rhetoric of migration, refugee, asylum, all this thing. I think what we need to really tackle is the misinformation, the disinformation, and the hate, because I think there is like a misunderstanding of what refugees are, because they're this better information sharing campaign is also needed, because I think we need to also balance what kind of positive narrative story we can also give out, but then some people may have a backlash against it. Why refugee, we need to accept them, and why they're taking the spaces from us, the housing prices and all this thing. So this is something is a bit challenging in a way how to do those narrative. And I recently came back from Hobart mission, and it gave an insight to how we need to tackle this. But then it is not a short-term solution. I see this as a midterm and a long-term solution that requires investment. In a way, is this misinformation, disinformation, hate, and all this proper education needs to start from the beginning in the school with the younger generation. And I think this is we're missing out at the moment. because we need to create a more accommodating and tolerant society to accept people. But then if you create already this environment from the beginning in the school, it does, and then they're not going to change drastically when they go into the society. So I don't know. So that's something I think we need to collectively look. How can we create those kind of better communication strategy and more acceptance of a very diverse profile? And I mean, Australia is a multicultural society, and recently, I mean, we passed the 1 million settlement humanitarian entrant to Australia since World War II. This is a positive one. I mean, this is like Australia is a society based of immigrants and people who have fled conflict and crisis, and this is how you did the nation building. But those kind of awareness is wearing out here, and people don't really realize they're. You mentioned when in the opening speech that you're a migrant yourself. You came to this country as a migrant. Many people came here as a migrant, but there's no acceptance or realization of that even the people who come here do not own this land. They're all migrants. But then that acceptance is not really ingrained or understood by majority of people. And also like people who have came in the past generation from various sectors, like from Bosnia crisis, Hungarian crisis, and also like Vietnamese. They are all very productive society member to the Australia, and those kind of thing is a bit forgotten in a way because they only look at the recent people coming in.
Absolutely. Oh, it's very, very important observations. I am heartened though with Refugee Week coming up at the scale of activities. I think our sector is one that refuses to take some of the crap that's out there, if I can be very frank. We really are, I think, out there challenging directly the sorts of disinformation that you're talking about. It's often though the lack of resourcing and support around those sort of campaigns. Now we are getting a flood of questions. I'm going to make every effort to try and put these to you and maybe group some of them up as well, and hoping of course that post this event we can follow up with any that are unanswered. But Sanjay says, I'm interested in understanding recent trends in the resettlement of unaccompanied minors. There's been a reduction in numbers over time, despite this cohort, as we know, being fairly major. Any comments that you can offer on why such small numbers of unaccompanied refugee minors are being resettled in Australia?
Maria, I think I need to come back on the exact numbers and also the reduction of the unaccompanied minor, because I think as mentioned, if we're not the one deciding the intake, so it's decided by the Department of Home Affairs of their priority cases. So it'll also depend on where they're putting the focus here at the moment. So it might be related to costing, but I cannot definitively say that. So maybe I'll come back on this one.
Of course, and we will follow up and get back. This might be a tricky one as well. Do you have any insights about how we could better advocate for the budget pressures to be managed by ending offshore processing at $13.5 billion, as you know, that's been spent since 2012, a fairly phenomenal figure. And of course, the externalisation of refugees with character issues to Nauru, now $2.5 billion budget. It feels like we're making this argument, but just not cutting through. Any insights?
This is a question I need to ask the Department of Home Affairs.
It's one perhaps we can all collectively put. Refugee-led organisations are often the first responders supporting vulnerable communities, yet many struggle to access resources. How can UNHCR strengthen partnerships and direct support for refugee-led organisations that are doing the services on the ground? Any thoughts there?
I mean, UNHCR, we can only do the advocacy at the moment, and then how to maybe bring attention to the government, like what are the gaps here, how can it be looked into? So those are the things we can do on the advocacy front. Unfortunately, we don't have the resource of financial to come and support at the moment when we have been heavily impacted as organization as well.
Yeah. Look, there's a number of comments too, obviously just commending you personally on the work that you do, but the challenges around adopting a human rights and anti-racism lens, I think I'd have to agree. Again, in my experience, human rights terminology isn't necessarily as well understood locally and domestically in Australia as it might be internationally. How do we kind of keep using that lens to remind people we are part of an international infrastructure? We do have international obligations. Any thoughts there?
I mean, Australia is a party to 1951 Refugee Convention. And just to maybe highlight to everyone that this is the 75th year of the 1951 Refugee Convention. But I think there is like some anomaly that is happening because even though the government has accepted and ratified the Refugee Convention, it is not translated into the domestic law. So there is like an incongruence, like you sign up for it, but you don't really implement it domestically. So I think there's a mismatch there as well. And then I understand that Australia doesn't have a Bill of Rights among the advanced countries. So that's also one of the fundamental issues that it doesn't have a Bill of Rights. So maybe human rights is going to be a bit challenging how to implement in Australia. So I think that is more of a civil society look at how can you come up with the Bill of Rights element there. But then also on other thing here, I mean, if you look at the investment or the cost that is involved in resettlement and the cost of externalization offshore, I mean, it's not comparable. It's not really, it's like really
not even close.
It's a fraction, but then it's like the domestic politics, the narrative. I mean, this is something that is quite interesting to see how it pans out here. And also the government is have to also look at the acceptance and the election. So I think this is something that has been ongoing for decades, which UNHCR cannot come and just solve the issue or to be part of how to resolve it. But this is something that the Australian citizens will need to constantly remind their government and politicians to answer. Yeah.
And as some people are saying, get behind the calls for a federal Human Rights Act. We've probably got time for one more. What concrete actions is UNHCR taking to improve protection and increase access to durable solutions, including resettlement pathways for LGBTQ plus refugees and other highly vulnerable groups, e.g. serious risks in countries of asylum such as Uganda?
I mean, we have all our presence in many of the countries there, and we work very closely with the host government to ensure that we can uphold and also deliver our protection mandate in many of the countries around the world. This is something that how we do it on the protection front. On the solution front is we have a very close continuous dialogue with the resettlement state to say these are the principles, these are the protection vulnerability, these are the profile who need to be reset. It's like to work with the government to say that resettlement is vital, complementary pathway is vital, and then to say that how can we maximize, expand the opportunity. But then this is like a form collectively as a civil society, how can we work together to persuade or dispel the notion that this is costing a fortune to the government? And also, how can we bring more efficiency and effectiveness and cost sharing mechanism to make sure that the humanitarian program is not going to be eroded and because of the sustainability element? I think we need to also play a better narrative or counteracting that, and how we can demonstrate that this is going to be a bit more cost-effective way of doing it. But this is something we need to advocate together, and then to have a common message to all of the people we are dealing with at the moment. And this is where you play a vital role.
Yeah, and that's certainly a role that we take very seriously, and I can already see a number of post events after this conversation. But we are out of time. If there was one key message, though, that you would like to convey to the settlement sector specifically, what would it be?
Well, thank you very much, Maria. I just wanted to thank all of the settlement sector for the excellent work you're delivering to ensure the refugee who arrive in Australia post-arrival, that they're better able to integrate and also to be part of the Australian society, because it's also creating the positive narrative to make sure that this is not a burden to the Australian society, but rather they are contributing and bringing more prosperity to the Australian society, because there's always a connotation refugees are a burden. And not like a source of contributors. So I just wanted to maybe give that message out. But then the provocative question I gave, my first one is, how do we balance the narrative of the golden standard of service delivery with the need to ensure the numbers are still there?
Yeah, okay question. As always, it is a delight to listen to your wealth of experience. Thank you so much. You're always so generous and so willing to address us. As I mentioned, we will be following up on a number of the challenges that you've thrown out to us. No doubt we will see you at many events across the nation as we gear up for Refugee Week. But please, everybody, join me in thanking Soo Jin for her wonderful presentation and, of course, her ongoing willingness to talk with us regularly. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Maria.
I'm hearing
still going
loud
to be around.
clapping and cheering. Thank you. Thank you.
Just bear with me. I had to bring down the shade.
No, absolutely. And look, it's not the end, folks. We are jumping into part 2, really, of this webinar. It now does give me great pleasure to be able to introduce to you the co-chair of Refugee Council of Australia, Adama Kamara. Adama, again, I've got a bio that's as long as my very, very long leg here, but I can say that you took on the leadership role in February 2026, of course, together with Paul Power. You are overseeing the community and public engagement and organisational governance. I could go on and on and on, but you are just someone I've known over many years. Your contribution to the sector has been extraordinary. You were born in Sierra Leone. Your commitment to refugee rights is directly informed by your personal history. Your family was in Australia for your father's university studies when civil war broke out in the home country, unable to return, sought asylum and became deeply involved in sponsoring and supporting other refugees displaced by conflict. You're someone that talks a lot about the fundamental centrality of lived experience, informing our practice, informing our frameworks. You are such a leader in the sector. Over to you, Adama. I know that you're going to give us a bit of an overview of the consultations coming up, and then an opportunity for our sector to have input. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maria. Let me just try to share my screen, so bear with me while I get that sorted. Okay, I'm hoping everybody can see my screen. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And I know a lot of you are working in frontline settlement and you hear directly from newly arrived families and communities. So that those insights that you have, or you're connected to refugee communities as well, that those insights that you have are really going to be valuable for today's discussion. I'm going to focus on the upcoming consultations on resettlement and complementary pathways, or the CRCP for short. The participation has been reduced this year, so the goal for today is really to get as much input from people who are working on the ground here into what we will be presenting at the consultations. So I will be covering, sorry, one second. I'll be covering what is the CRCP, so just some background for those who may not be across it, who attends, what's going to be discussed this year, and then there'll be an opportunity for all of you to provide some feedback on some 3 consultation questions that'll allow me to prioritise what I should be raising in the consultations this year. Okay, so the CRCP, it's started in 1995 and it's the main forum for discussions on international refugee resettlement policy. It's a multi-partite forum, and basically that just means there's many stakeholders that come along to that. That includes UNHCR, governments, and mainly resettlement governments, governments that resettle refugees, NGOs, the private sector, and also refugee representatives as well. So the Australian delegation from Australia has been well represented in the past. So you've had organisations involved in service delivery like SSI, SCOA, and MYAN as peaks in the sector, and organisations like RCOA have participated in the past. There's also business and academics, and as I mentioned already, refugee advocates that participate in this forum. It's an opportunity for open dialogue on policy and also procedural matters around resettlement. There's sharing of resources, a chance to really talk about some of the operational administrative delays, and also think about new ways that resettlement can be done. It's really important dialogue, especially when it comes to, because as Soo Jin mentioned, the number of states that are actually involved in resettlement is reducing. The number of people that are resettled is reducing. So the dialogue is really important to keep the momentum, but also look at what else can we do. It's hosted each year. It's a rotating chair. So this year it's hosted by the Swedish and Norwegian governments. UNHCR is involved as well. It is as part of the organising group, and there is a refugee advisory committee group that advises the organisation of this whole conference. The advisory group was established in 2020, and it's really an official way for the organisers to get lived experience input into the processes, as well as in processes for the CRCP. Okay, so for this year, the theme is the way forward for resettlement and complementary pathways in challenging times. So Soo Jin painted a picture earlier about the number of refugees in the world and the number of resettlement spaces and what's happening. So this forum is going to be held in that context. It's happening the 15th to 16th of June in Geneva. And in the past, it was about 350 people would attend. This year, the participation has reduced to 70. And I guess it's really looking at the agenda is looking at the context, sorry, is around there's funding cuts to the sector. I mentioned already the decreasing number of resettlement places and declining commitment from states in terms of how many people they resettle. Australia is now the second, as Soo Jin mentioned, highest. This is the first time Australia's been the second in quite a while. There's also shifting political priorities globally as well. So this forum is a chance to have those really frank conversations about the future of resettlements. And it's looking at how to protect and maintain resettlement options when many countries are actually actively reducing their intake and scaling back on what they're going to, on how many people they resettle. The agenda, so it's a 2-day forum. The agenda is going to focus on, include, I guess, an update from the UNHCR, the High Commissioner for Refugees, on what UNHCR's priorities are, what their capacity and resourcing looks like. There will also be an update from the European Union on the Union resettlement framework and what members of the EU are doing when it comes to resettlement. And we'll also have a discussion on the strategic benefits of resettlement and the evidence base for resettlement. On the second day, we're looking at how to retain and engage resettlement states, how to address negative migration narratives, and looking at the data on complementary pathways. There's also side meetings with NGOs only. So we'll have a meeting before the CRCP kicks off and then a debrief as well. And at this meeting, there will be statements from NGOs, a collective statement to put our collective views forward to government and UNHCR, and there'll be a refugee statement as well. So that was a brief overview. And I guess the reason why we're hosting this consultation is that myself, from the Refugee Council of Australia, will be the only Australian NGO attending this consultation this year. And we really want to get your insights on the sector's insights to inform our advocacy. So for the rest of this session, I just want to get your input into 3 questions. And the first one is really looking about gaps in the pre-departure, before people arrive here in Australia. The first question is based on what newly arrived families tell you. What are the most critical systemic gaps or protection challenges during the overseas selection and pre-departure process? So, Maria, I'm not sure if people are able to unmute themselves for this part of the section, because it would be quite helpful if they're able to voice their question, comment, and keep it brief, just so that we can get as many comments as possible. I've also put in a link to a survey as well, and that survey has the same questions. So if you don't get a chance to say, there's still opportunity for you to input, and that will close on the 7th of June. So okay, I can see Margaret.
Margaret. Yep. I'm happy to call it. And folks, you can also use the chat function, so please do. And if you feel like you don't get an opportunity to say what you'd like, we can follow up with you, of course. So send us an email or either directly or via the Teams. That'd be great. Marg, over to you.
Thanks very much, Maria, and Adama, good luck. It's going to be an interesting meeting. One of the things that we've discovered through the regional research is that the refugees have very limited understanding of the destination that they're going to and why that destination was selected for them, and particularly when it is a regional destination. And that can have a significant impact on the trust that they have if they are expecting one thing, discover another, they don't understand why it was chosen, and it undermines trust and undermines initial settlement.
Thank you, Matt. I think there's another comment relating to that as well. Thank you. That's important. Do you have any suggestions on what can be done, how that can be addressed beforehand?
Through discussion with the entrants about where they're going, and potentially linking them to people who are in that, to the hosts in that destination, so that they understand the reasons behind it.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Okay. And I can see some comments.
Maria, you're on mute, so if you're talking to us, we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm just saying thank you very much. There are quite a few comments that are coming through the chat function, and we can ensure that we group all those and document them. But are there any other hands that have come up? And I'm sure my team will help me if I can't see them all. Any?
Some other comments that came, people have submitted through the survey previously, was around the long waiting periods, the challenges in registering with UNHCR in the host country, and not being registered with UNHCR has led to, the fear of being arrested, detention, the challenges around healthcare, education, and the safety of LGBTQI refugees in host countries has also been mentioned. Lack of access to confidential translation, and also the lack of Australian government presence in a country that the person will be resettled from was raised as well as a concern. But again, similar points to what Margaret mentioned about connecting people to Australia, not just families, but also services here, the settlement services here in Australia, once the person has been identified to say that they're going to be resettling in Australia. So that's some interesting, really practical suggestions there.
Adama, we've got Arif who's got his hand up, and then someone else, Manasina, please.
Thanks, Maria, and thanks, Adam, for that presentation. From my observation and what I see from here, from families, and what we see, both for Afghan in Pakistan and Iran, there is no UNHCR, in terms of how they will select people or where people can go to register. And if there are, the level of the workload is huge. Most of the time they just want to decline because the demand is too high. I know there's one registration in Pakistan that I heard in Quetta. Every single family goes, and the screening process or the level of the number of decline, they will see and decline because it's too much people. And what's happening in Iran currently, there is no UNHCR in Iran. How would people register themselves? So that's another gap that exists for Afghan, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you, Arif. Yeah, it's quite challenging situation in Iran. I can see Soo Jin's put it there, her hand up. Do you want to respond to this comment, Soo Jin, before we go to Dinesh?
Yeah, perhaps maybe I just want to maybe clarify that UNHCR is present in Iran and Pakistan. So we do have our staff base in both operation in many of the field presence. But please bear in mind, I did highlight that there are 2.5 million in need of resettlement, but there are less than 30,000 places available. So therefore, not everyone who register will be resettled. That's the harsh reality I just wanted to flag. And many people who are in the pipeline at the moment are also having a delay because we cannot just submit, because we also have to work with the resettlement country who are willing to also deliberate as well. So I just want to just highlight this one, that we're still advocating with the government. We're saying that allocation is very fundamentally important to secure the asylum and protection space in the country of asylum. But then this is something that has to be worked together with the Australian government, because sometimes they will say, we need how many places here and there. So therefore, sometimes there is a delay or there's going to be some suspension happening. We don't have this is the harsh reality. And I just wanted to say that we do have our office present in those two countries, but then staff in the beginning of the war, we can't have the staff being exposed to war and being killed. So staff safety is very critical for us. So the first 3 weeks when the war broke up, it was more to ensure that staff could look after themselves and their family in doing it. But we do have our staff base in many of the field locations who continue to deliver. So I just wanted to highlight that. And also I see many comment that many of the assistants have been reduced. Yes, many of the assistants have been reduced because our funding have been reduced drastically. We have been reduced drastically, and we're trying to look at what are going to be our priority area of intervention. Food ration is not our area of responsibility, that's WFP. So if we have health, if we have other agency who can step in, UNHCR will deprioritize that because we don't have funding for that. Because UNHCR is going to prioritize for protection delivery on the registration, community-based protection. But if there are other agencies who can step in, then we will deprioritize activity. I do understand many of the humanitarian agencies also have to reduce their funding, but that's the reality we face at the moment, that many had to reduce their assistance. So what they used to get in the previous years is no longer available at the moment. And I'm sorry that this is the sad reality we face at the moment.
Yeah, it's quite a challenging time for.
Can I quickly ask, where are those offices, if you can send to us in Pakistan and Iran? Because even in here, I basically receive on a weekly basis requests from Pakistan and Iran that they need support. Because our Facebook and website are active, and people from those countries are inquiring to be resettled in Australia. But and sometimes when we refer them to NHCR, but we don't have a contact or thing, so we can refer them people to go.
Maybe I will share you the later on that there's like all this office because we are based in Tehran, we have field offices, etc. But you do understand the internet has been blocked in Iran as well. So
Yeah,
please
it
bear
just
that
came
also in
back
mind as
last
well.
week.
Yes. So now it's just that like, and our staffing number have been reduced drastically as well. So we are not able to respond to all the queries as well because we're also going through another cut. So I just wanted to say because any of this work involves human resources, is a very intensive process. But if we don't have the funding and we don't have the manpower, then we cannot be answering all the questions. I just have to maybe flag that one, that many of the questions would not be addressed, and many of the like the requests will be said. Just requesting resettlement doesn't mean you resettle because there's so many people in the pipeline.
Thank you, Soo Jin. I might take these two questions and then I'll move on to the next question. So Dinesh.
Hi, Adama, and thanks for this opportunity, and also Soo Jin, great to see you as well. One of the points that you mentioned in the slide is about the pre-departure process, where IOM is quite heavily involved in the Australian Cultural Orientation Program. One of the points, if you can raise in CRCP, would be about the coordination between the host government and the Australian government, which we tend to see if there's a breakdown that impacts the migrants who are in those countries quite adversely. That impacts their ability to have a safe way out, to even get exit permits and arrive in the country. This has then a rippling effect on the onshore providers when it comes to settlement. So just wanted to highlight that and maybe a point that can be raised from our end. Thank you.
Yep, fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to say your name wrong, so I apologize. Stevan?
Thank you, Adama. It's Stefani.
Savani, sorry.
No, all good. So a point that I wanted to raise is having, all young people being put on permanent visas and, more of the humanitarian and family streams being prioritized because usually it's only 25% of the annual cap over skill independent visas. So that would be great. And reunion visas for parents and permanent parent visas for those young people to bring their siblings and family members.
Fantastic, thank you. So I've put the link to the survey in the chat. So if anyone has any more comments on for the first question, feel free to add it to the chat or complete the survey. I'll just move on, just conscious of time, and I want to make sure we get through all the questions. The second one is around, I guess, some blue sky thinking, really. What innovative models or new ideas do you have for expanding resettlement pathways? So we did have some comments in the survey previously. Some people talked about family reunion, looking at a different way of managing family reunion for humanitarian entrance, expanding complementary pathways. One, so they're additional to the intake, but also looking at how the application submitted there are processed. So looking at vulnerability first, in the complementary pathways cohort, people who come through complementary pathways. And the third comment was around strategic use of resettlement. So it's looking at how Australia can have discussions with our neighbours like Indonesia, Malaysia and Thailand on how, if we able to give some rights to people in those countries, whether it's access to education, medical assistance, right to work, looking at then perhaps linking it to the aid budget or other strategic objectives that Australia has. Dor, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Adam, and all the best in the upcoming consultation. I have a small suggestion and a way forward in regards to growing complementary and resettlement numbers. I genuinely believe in the try test kind of approach for those countries who are hesitant or may have not have resettlement. I would suggest that UNHCR should put forward a try test cases, maybe 5 families in areas that would or may not take resettlement before, and test and retrade the process and see what would come out of the resettlement. I think some people don't know what resettlement look like, or have a different idea or conceptual of what resettlement is, and the refugees particularly. If we can break the ice in selling a small quota to countries that are usually hesitant of resettlement, that would be my suggestion. Try and test kind of model.
Fantastic, thank you. I think there's some comments in the chat as well. Okay. So any other comments around innovations on new ideas and on new models for expanding resettlement pathways?
No, there doesn't seem to be any hands.
All right, I'll go to the last one. So if there's one thing you would like us to advocate for on behalf of NGOs at this year's CRCP, what would that be? Noting that it's an international audience, what is the one thing you'd like us to advocate for? Okay. So there's some comments around fee waivers for family reunification, commitment of government to commit to consistent policy of intake and allocation. Okay, Dor, your hand is up.
Sorry, I might be holding the microphone. If there is one thing that I would like to be raised, it is around the consistency and equity in allocation of resettlement numbers. I know governments come with their preconceived ideas of who they want to resettle, but I think if as organization in the front line, we would value equity in approach.
Mm-hmm.
I would also encourage an approach around emergency humanitarian intake. That, to me, yes, sometimes people go against it, but I would value it as an important component to be adapted by a number of resettlement countries. If there is Australia being one, I think they have been talking about developing that, but it hasn't yet come to fruition. So I think it's something that can be advocated for.
Mm-hmm.
But also something that is consistent, that is applied to same cohort in the same way, rather than pick and choosing who we apply the emergency response to and whom we don't. So that would be my thing. And finally, if we can advocate for peace in the world, ceasefire to current wars, and resolution, amicable resolution of conflicts. That would be my thing. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dor. Graham.
Hello. Yes, I know we're sort of in the same office, and but yeah, I really wanted to pick up on something that Soo Jin highlighted, and I'm gonna be putting on my apron board member secretariat hat on, because I noticed also in the agenda there's a specific item around the route-based approach that UNHCR is adopting with states, and Australia is obviously very supportive of this whole idea of a roots-based approach, as are a number of European governments. But as Soo Jin highlighted, the strategic use, which again is also an agenda item there, of resettlement, is something that's really important. And I think for our region, as was highlighted, work rights in Thailand, alternatives to detention, the ability to get people out of detention both in Thailand and in Malaysia. A lot of that, and as Soo Jin highlighted also with Indonesia, allowing people to be rescued, the Rohingya boats, a lot of that is contingent on resettlement partnerships and knowing that that people will be supported, or that governments won't be left if they actually start doing the right thing. We've been pushing a long time for work rights in places like Thailand. So now that Thailand is actually stepping up and providing those sort of protection solutions, it's important that governments don't step away. And while Australia and New Zealand have a bit of a focus, without the US, we really need to make sure that Canada and Europe don't forget some of these other countries outside of their region that have actually started to do the right thing. So I think, if we want to support the route-based approach, if we want to support countries doing the right thing, particularly in other parts of the world, we've got some great examples here. So I think that would be a really important message that we can take from this region to the meeting.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Thanks, Graham. Do you mind explaining what the route-based approach is, just quickly?
I think Soo Jin could probably do a better job. She's put her hand up, so I'm going to let her.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, over to you, Soo Jin.
Oh, Graham, thank you very much for broaching the idea of the route-based approach. Maybe before I go into the route-based approach, I just wanted to respond back to Dor. For UNHCR and in our submission, we highlighted the need to have a predictability and also to have a multi-year planning on our the humanitarian program, because that will be also better for us to efficiently and effectively manage some of the caseload submission and also the pipeline. So these are some of the elements that we've been advocating with the government of Australia. Another thing is that we've been also advocating the emergency allocation of those people in need. But I think from the Australian perspective, they still would not waive the character, medical, and security assessment, etc. So therefore, this emergency submission doesn't really work at the moment. But nevertheless, we're going to be still advocating on this point. So I just wanted to maybe highlight that these are some of the element that you have been sharing is a point that we are still advocating and also underscoring in our submission to the government. Now, coming back on the route-based approach. Now, what is a route-based approach? This is like an initiative that we're working with our partner. I just want to also, I noticed that Dinesh is also here from IOM as well, that we look at more of the mobility element of MODIS. I mentioned in Asia Pacific, we have two big situations, the Afghan situation and the Myanmar situation. So the Afghan situation is Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, and you have people returning in adverse condition. But meaning that people are on the move because Afghanistan is already a very fragile state. Economically, it's not viable. There are a lack of infrastructure and all this, the services that are available. So people are moving westward toward Europe. Now, in the other one, we have the Southeast Asia, the route-based approach, which is more of a route like the movement from Myanmar, Bangladesh to Thailand, and then going to the south. To like Malaysia and then Indonesia. But people somehow, they go to Indonesia, but their ultimate destination is Malaysia at the moment. So these are the people on the movements. If they cannot find a better protection or solution, they'll be moving onward. But then how do we try to mitigate the perilous journey and also minimize the exposure they're going to be going in, looking at the various aspects of the pillar, like how do we ensure that asylum system are provided, there are better screening mechanism, and then how do we make sure the capacity of the government is assisted in screening those individuals and like rescue and search and rescue, and then while they're in the host country, how can they be looked after the well-being? Like if most people in Bangladesh, we have 1.1 million refugees in 33 camps, and we have many people in Malaysia, the well-being, like because they have to be sustained there as well. But that is not only looking at in the singular country's perspective, but looking at the across the country, across the region, and across multiple partners who can come in and work together. So we're also looking at working with the international financial institution like the World Bank and ADB, because under the World Bank, there's a sub-window under refugee and the host community support mechanism where Bangladesh, there close to $2 billion have been invested to help the Rohingya refugee and the community that is supporting the refugee in the host community. Meaning that how do we bring the development funding to ensure that the people can be sustained, and also looking at how do we go for the inclusion element of right to access to work, and then also looking at the health system, the education system, that refugee can be integrated into the system. So this is also looking at how Malaysian front on the inclusion element. But then it's also looking holistically, not only at the host government, but also with the resettlement country, where they provide the solution element coming with resettlement and the complementary pathway. How do they come in doing the burden sharing as part of the Global Compact on Refugee? But ultimately, I mentioned in the dual solution, the ultimate solution is the voluntary repatriation. How do we address the root causes, working with many of the countries of the country of origin, but also the neighboring country, in creating the conducive environment? This one is looking at, like, we work and reach out to the ASEAN partners, the regional state, like the powerhouses of the, like, China, India, and various countries in the world, and also looking at the Bali process and the IGC, the intergovernment consultation process. All of this is how do we address and come with providing the solution. So meaning that it is a holistic approach from the asylum, the screening, disembarkation, the registration process, supporting them while they're in the country of host, and also bringing the IFIs, the International Development Fund, for the inclusion development programming, and then on the solution part, the voluntary repatriation, resettlement, complement pathway. So this is more of a holistic approach of addressing the issues with multi-stakeholder, multi-partner, and across the multi-sector intervention. So this is part of the root-based approach, with the government of Australia is very interested to work with us in doing it. So we're also getting funding from the government of Australia on the asylum capacity building. How do we bring and also work, like, so those money are invested in Malaysia because they're doing the asylum registration process, the capacity build in Thailand, in Indonesia, etc. So I just wanted to give that root-based approach is very important, because in Africa, you have the Northeast, the root base, where it's going to the northern Mediterranean route. So you have those, we have various root base in Africa and in Asia and in America. So this is something that is the thing that we're discussing, that it cannot be looked in singularly by one country, one agency alone. So Bram, I don't know if I have answered this. Maybe you can also compliment me here.
I think you did a very thorough explanation.
Excellent job. Thank you, Soo Jin.
Yeah. And I think there's some comments in the chat around, again, similar around the strategic use of resettlement, looking at host countries, how Australia can work with displaced populations in host countries and the governments there, giving them access to safety, healthcare, and so on. There's quite a few comments about the importance of lived experience, meaningful refugee participation in designing the solutions. And we hear you very loudly, strong about that as well. And also a comment that refugees should be part of the CRCP. That's something we believe in wholeheartedly. And we've made representation to UNHCR, the NGO co-chairs, as well as the CRCP, and expressed our extreme disappointment that refugees were not included as a distinct group apart from the CRCP advisory group, that there should be there in greater numbers, and not just included as the government rep or the NGO rep, as in my case. So we've heard that strongly, and we will continue to advocate for greater representation. Margaret.
Thanks, Adama. A quick question for Soo Jin, and then a quick comment, sort of picking up on some of the comments. Soo Jin, the last time that we had a truly comprehensive response to dealing with refugee crisis was the Comprehensive Plan of Action. What lessons do you think can be learnt from that? And what is the potential for there to be that 3-level collaborative approach to large-scale population movement. Is that possible in today's world order? And then my comment going into the, sort of picking up on some of the other comments that in the chat, in addition to having elements in place to support resettled refugees, an additional thing that really has to be looked at is the training for the people who are going to be doing that, and looking at ensuring that there is a trauma-informed, strengths-based approach, but most importantly, that enables choice. And I think of this in particular with some of the other major resettlement countries, particularly the Scandinavians, where choice is not nearly as much of a factor. Developing the agency of the settled refugees is not given the same priority that we give. And I think this is a really important contribution that we can make to that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret. You're really giving me some thoughts how to respond to this question of the CPA. And this is something of the lesson learned, and it was really a collective comprehensive response by many of the actors involved here. And I think moving forward in this the current crisis of fragmentation and multiple crises, and also like transferring responsibility, this is something that we have to be looking into. How can we work together with various partners in addressing many of the conflict in the world? So I think, Margaret, this is really a challenging element that you're throwing us. How can we come up with the solution? This is like, I don't have $1 million question to that or answer to that, Margaret. But I think this is something maybe it has to be raised in the CRCP. Maybe Adama, you can maybe ask this question to many of the stakeholders who are sitting there, who can also be part of the solution provided there.
And maybe draw on, you know, people like Jeff Crisp who were around during that time to identify what some of those core issues are.
The core issue, but then the current the landscape is quite different from that era as well. And then also like trying to own up to the responsibility sharing, I think is the appetite is no longer there, I think, unfortunately.
Sad but true.
So thank you, everyone. I know that there's probably more we can talk about. It's just I'm conscious of time. We had a commitment that we'd finish at 2:30. So you'll see on your screen there's a QR code which takes you the survey. If you're able to complete it by Sunday, the 7th of June, I will look at all the responses and then compile some notes for me to raise in those discussions and the meetings, and I will be reporting back in part 2 of this session to give the feedback on what the discussions were, if there was any agreement that was reached, and just a proceeding so everyone has an idea of what happened at the CRCP. Thank you all so much for contributing, and feel free to reach out if you would like to have a conversation on other things to prioritise, for us to prioritise as well. Thanks. I'll hand over back to Maria.
Thank you so much, Adama, and of course to Soo Jin again. You mentioned part 2, and we will be hosting a webinar on the 24th of June, but that'll be confirmed. The idea there is that we partner up with some of the other lead partners. We mentioned SSI as well. So you'll be coming back telling us more about what the outcomes were of your 2 days there. And we'll have a panel discussion where delegates from a regional visit will be talking about their insights from Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh and Bangkok. So look out for that one. Tuesday, the 24th of June is the proposed date, but please keep in mind that may well change. can I again extend my gratitude to both our speakers. I think the feedback that we've received is tremendous, and no doubt people will keep sending in comments. Thank you to RCOA, to UNHCR, to SSI, and various other partners that I know were involved in the setting up of this session. Go well, folks. Enjoy your the rest of your day, and we will be following up with a recording of this session and distributing it to each of our members. Thank you once again. Go well, all. See you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much again, Soo Jin. Always wonderful. The comments, the texting, it really highlights how much people are wanting this. Much appreciated. We'll be in touch.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.